prestation, what is being demanded sa obligation? Is it to give, to do, or not to do? Do not confuse yourself with the object from the subject of the obligation. Okay? And the efficient cause or the juridical tie. Without this efficient cause, you do not have the right cause of action to demand for remedy or whatever is available to you. All right. It ties between the two subjects by reason of which the debtor is bound in favor of the creditor to perform the prestation. Okay. So how will you distinguish natural obligation from civil obligation? Pag civil obligation, there is a binding law or a positive law. While natural obligation, it's the binding effect of this is equity and natural justice, right? Um, Again, civil obligation it can be enforced by court action, and natural law uh, it can be compelled by court action, but it depends on the exclusive depends exclusively from conscience. Okay. So these are the legal provisions that defines or expressly provides for the natural obligations as to the basis and enforceability. So for natural obligation, we have there exists a juridical tie. Well, for moral obligation, there's none. Performance by debtor, um, legal fulfillment of an obligation, while for moral obligation, it's only dependent on the act of pure liberality. Natural obligation exists within the domain of the law, while moral obligations exist mainly or entirely on the morals. Uh, since we have juridical tie with natural obligation, it can be enforced while moral duty is inexistent in the juridical point of view for moral obligation. Okay? So the following are the sources of civil obligation or obligations. We have the law, contracts, quasi-contracts, acts or omissions punished by law, or quasi-delicts. Or delicts are acts of omissions punishable by law. We also have, there's another term for that, delicts. And then we have quasi-delicts. So anuhan na lang natin, simplihan natin. Law contracts, quasi-contracts, delicts, and quasi-delicts. Be careful with the spelling of delicts, mga Gen Z na kayo. So, delicts, hindi yung D-E-L-I-K. Delikado. Tama ba spelling? Question. True or false? Contracts is an obligation. Anyone? Volunteer? Yes, Miss Ruran.
Yes po, sir.
True or false?
Opo.
Contract is an obligation. Po? Hello?
Hello po.
Yes,
True po, sir.
true. Any other answer? Siyempre false na isa. No, a contract is not an obligation but rather a source of obligation. Kaya ito, arise from obligation. Okay. Like I said, um, there are kinds of obligations: civil obligation, natural obligation, moral obligation, and walang contract obligation po. Okay? Huwag kayong malito dyan ha. May mga tricky questions na mga ganyan na lumalabas sa board exam. Next. Ayan. Sources of obligation. Law. Who can read Article 1158? Is Aldana?
Sir? Sorry po,
Are you
napindot.
raising? Okay.
Napindot.
Can you read, please?
Article 1158, obligations derived from law are not presumed. Only those expressly determined in this code or in special laws are demandable and shall be regulated by the precepts of the law which establishes them and as to what has not been foreseen by the provisions of this book.
Thank you. So, simple lang ang ibig sabihin nito. There's no need to demand for the performance of the obligation kapag ang source ng obligation is law. One very good example of this is our obligation to pay taxes. 'Di ba? Wala nang demand from the BIR for us to pay taxes except kung delinquent tayo. The moment we earn an income, if we are an employee, wini-withhold na agad yung tax payable natin. Okay? Contracts. Obligations arising from contracts have the force of the law between the contracting parties and should be complied in good faith. So again, contracts is not a kind of obligation but rather a source of obligation. So kapag may kontrata kayo, bawa si A and B, they entered into a contract of sale, yung contract of sale binding lang sa kanilang dalawa, exception kapag it's also binding sa heirs and their assigns as stipulated in the contract. Okay? So more on contracts when we are done with obligations. It is a meeting of minds between two persons whereby one binds himself with respect to the other to give something or to render some service. Okay? Quasi-contracts. Itong medyo nakakalito. Ang 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 dynamics ng quasi-contract, ang principle dito is unjust enrichment. It's a juridical relation which arises from certain lawful, voluntary, and unilateral acts to the end that no one may be unjustly enriched or benefited at the expense of the other. So the act must be lawful, voluntary, and unilateral. Unilateral, ibig sabihin, hindi mo din siya ginusto. A good example of this, nung kumain kami sa Shakey's, magkakaibigan, after shift noon, nasa JP Morgan pa kami, sweldo. So, kala namin yung isa naming kasamahan, nagmamayabang, ang daming in-order. So kami, syempre, kain lang ng kain. Yung pala, nagkamali ng sinerve sa amin na food. So what do we need to do there? Ang pangit naman na kinain na namin. So we have the obligation to pay. Ganon. So, unilateral, hindi naman namin ginusto na i-serve sa amin yung food na hindi naman namin in-order. Lawful naman yun, wala namang nagbabawal na huwag kaming serve ng pagkain. And voluntary on their part. On the other party's part. Kaya kailangan voluntary din yung pagbayad namin. Okay? So we have this kind of quasi-contract, micro-showroom gesture, and solutio indebiti. Negotiorum gestio, juridical relation which arises whenever a person voluntarily takes charge of an agency or management of the business or property of another without any power or authority from the latter. So halimbawa, just to illustrate, halimbawa, sa probinsya meron kayong fish pond. Tapos, I'm sorry, yung kapitbahay nyo merong fish pond. Tapos, nagbakasyon sila sa States. Naiwanan yung fish pond. Um, Hindi sila nakabalik, na-delay yung flight, or nagkaroon ng whatever emergency sa States, kailangan ng i-harvest yung fish pond. So, ikaw, because of good faith, kapitbahay kayo, ikaw na yung nag-harvest ng fish pond and ikaw na rin yung nagbenta ng mga na-harvest na fish pond. Pagdating ng may-ari ng kapitbahay nyo, you have the right to reimbursement of your expenses. So yan ang ibig sabihin ng negotiorum gestio. Okay? And solutio indebiti, ito yung in-explain ko kanina, a juridical relation which arises whenever a person unduly delivers a thing true or by mistake of another who has no right to demand it. One good example din itong solutio indebiti, kapag may na-deposit sa account mo, sa savings account mo, nagkamali si cashier, instead of 100,000, ginawang 1 million, you have the right, the bank has the right to demand the return of the overpaid deposit amount. And ikaw na yung debtor, you have the right to surrender the money. Okay? I'm sorry, you have the obligation to surrender the money. Next, we have acts or omissions punished by law or crimes. Ang legal basis nito wala sa Civil Code. It's in the revised Penal Code of the Republic of the Philippines. Article 100, every person criminally liable for a felony is also civilly liable. Article 104, what is included in civil liability? Civil liability established in Articles 100, 101, 102, and 103 includes restitution, reparation of damage caused, and indemnification of consequential damages. Question po? Okay. Next, we have quasi-delicts. Quasi-delicts, another term for this is torts. Siguro naririnig niyo madalas sa news yung reckless imprudence resulting to homicide, reckless imprudence resulting to damage to property, reckless imprudence resulting to physical injuries. Ito yung source quasi-delicts. Whoever by acts or omission causes damage to another, there being fault or negligence, is obliged to pay for the damage done. Such fault or negligence, if there's no pre-existing contractual relation between the parties, is called quasi-delict. Ang key term dito is there is no pre-existing contractual relation between the parties. Okay? So halimbawa, nasagasaan kayo, you're just crossing the street, tapos bigla-biglang merong nag-overspeed na sasakyan, nasagasaan kayo, criminally liable siya for reckless imprudence resulting to physical injury, and at the same time, liable din siya through quasi-delict. Okay? We go to compliance with obligations. Who can read? Article 19. Miss Babak?
Article 19. Every person must, in the exercise of his rights and in the performance of his duties, act with justice, give everyone his due, and observe honesty and good faith.
Thank you. Ibig sabihin nito, in the exercise of your rights and in the performance of his duties, rights and duties, it includes performance of what is obliged for you to do. So this covers your in the performance of your obligation. So you have to act with justice, give everyone his due, and observe honesty and good faith. All right. Um, 1163, Bidal, can you read? Miss Gador?
If Article 1163, every person obliged to give something is also obliged to take care of it with the proper diligence of a good father of a family, unless the law or the stipulation of the parties requires another standard of care.
Very good. Proper diligence of a good father of a family. Who can explain what this means? First time yung marinig yon, term na to. Diligence of a good father of a family. Yes, Mr. Monserrat.
Sir, yun pa, based din po sa book. It means the ordinary care that an average person exercises in taking care of his property po.
Very good. So ibig sabihin, kapag you have an obligation to give, to deliver a specific object, or you have the obligation to deliver a specific car, wag mo namang alagaan mo siya. Wag mong gamitin ng gamitin, wag mong ipag-drive to the point na pag dineliver mo na siya, bus na yung gasolina, gas-gas na, madaming gas-gas, flat na yung tire. Even if you have the right to use it, alagaan nyo pa rin, because in case of loss, deterioration, or damage to the property, you will be liable for damages. Exception nito if the nature and circumstance of the obligation requires a specific due diligence, degree of diligence. Okay? Ayan. Unless the law or the stipulation of the parties requires another standard of care. 1164, madalas itong lumabas sa board. Who can read? See. Mr. Martinez, can you read please?
Article 1164. The creditor has a right to the fruits of the thing from the time the obligation to deliver it arises. However, he shall acquire no real right over it until the same has been delivered to him.
Very good. What does it mean, Mr. Martinez?
Based po sa pagkakaintindi ko, sir, yung creditor po is meron po siyang right para i-demand po yung obligation.
When will he have the right to demand the obligation?
Wait po.
Fruits of the thing, ibig sabihin nito, hindi siya limited sa natural fruits. It includes industrial fruit, civil fruits, or natural fruits. Halimbawa, civil industrial fruits. This includes the rents. Kung ang obligation is to um, acquire a certain parcel of land, tapos maraming mga nakatira doon na nagre-rent. The rent due or the rent revenue on that parcel of land, kasama siya, it is an example of the fruits of that thing. But the question here is, who has the right to the fruits of the thing before the obligation to deliver it arise? Is it the debtor or the creditor? Yes, Miss Tan.
Sir, yung creditor ko po yata yung may right kapag ka po hindi pa nag-a-arise. Yung sabi nga po dyan, kapag ka lang po yung delivery nag-arise, yun lang po. Kunyari po, sa may usapan po kayo na December pa mapapasayo yung land, doon lang po yung mga rentals na nare-receive ni creditor mapupunta sa'yo if hindi pa po niya na-deliver by that time. Hindi po.
Okay, very good. Paano kung December ang usapan, ang nature and obligation, December i-deliver sa iyo yung yung kabayo, isang kabayo. Tapos October nabuntis yung kabayo, nanganak sa January. Kanino mapupunta yung pony ba yung tawag sa baby ng kabayo? Yung anak ng kabayo, who has the right dun sa anak ng kabayo?
Sir, for me po yung debtor na po.
Sino?
Debtor na po.
Debtor?
Opo.
Sorry? Hindi kita marinig, Miss Tan. Sorry.
Sir, yung debtor na po yata yung may right doon kahit November na buntis.
Who has another answer? Siyempre, debtor, creditor lang siya. Yes, Miss Ocampo.
Sir, as for the right of the creditor to the fruits po, sabi po dito, the creditor is entitled to the fruits of the thing to be delivered from the time the obligation to make delivery arises po. So, it's still the creditor po.
Creditor. Although nabuntis yung kabayo, November, dineliver siya ng December, tapos January nanganak, kay creditor pa rin. Tama ba?
Yes po, sir.
Okay, yes, very good. Kasi nagkaroon ng fruits nagkaroon ng anak yung kabayo, January na, nakay-creditor na siya. Okay? However, he shall acquire no real right over it until the same has been delivered to him. Real obligation to. What does it mean? Real right. Let's stick with the kabayo. March siya dapat i-deliver. Nanganak yung kabayo ng May, na i-deliver yung kabayo pati yung anak October. Question: kailan magkakaroon ng real right si creditor doon sa kabayo, sa baby kabayo, sa fruit ng baby kabayo? Ang ibig sabihin lang nito, guys, wala siyang right to demand anything dun sa baby kabayo until the same has been delivered to him. So kahit pinanganak pa siya after ng date ng delivery, meron lang siyang karapatan doon. Yung right niya is expectant pa lang. Expectant pa lang yung right niya doon. Okay? So hangga't hindi siya na i-deliver sa kanya, wala siyang karapatang exercise yung right niya as an owner. Although meron lang siyang expectancy pa lang yung right niya doon. Okay? Na sorry na malino yung explanation ko, guys, or medyo ano ba, hangga't hindi napapasayo, hangga't hindi na deliver yung fruit of the thing kay creditor, ang merong right dyan ay si debtor pa rin. And we will go back dun sa duty ni debtor to take good care of the fruits of the thing with the proper diligence of a good father of a family. Because in case of loss, deterioration, or damage to the thing, he will be liable for damages. Okay? Let's move on. When what is to be delivered is a determinate thing, the creditor, in addition to the right granted him by Article 1170, may compel the debtor to make the delivery. If the thing is indeterminate or generic, he may ask that the obligation be complied with at the expense of the debtor. If the obligor delays or has promised to deliver the same thing to two or more persons who do not have the same interest, he shall be responsible for any fortuitous event until he has effected the delivery. Ibig sabihin ng first paragraph ng 1165, determinate thing, um, 1165 talks about determinate and indeterminate thing. So, kung ang i-deliver sa iyo ay specific or not a specific object or subject of the obligation. If the obligor delays, these are the last paragraph of 1165 talks about exceptions in case of fortuitous event where the debtor may not will still be held liable for damages. (1166) The obligation to give a determinate thing includes the delivery of all its accessions and accessories, even though they may not have been mentioned. So there are three types of obligation. Obligation to give a specific or generic thing, obligation to do, and obligation not to do. Question po sa three types of obligation? We also have kinds of performance, specific performance. This includes the performance by the debtor himself, substitute performance, a performance at the expense of the debtor, and equivalent performance, or this includes the grant, or this it's the grant for of damages. Specific performance, ibig sabihin, obligation to deliver in a contract of sale, obligation to deliver a specific car, Montero Sport. Kapag na-deliver na siya at ginawa ni debtor, we call that specific performance. Substitute performance. Obligation ni debtor na pinturahan yung bahay mo, pero hindi obligation niya on December 1, pinturahan yung bahay mo, hindi niya magagawa or hindi niya nagawa at the expense of the debtor, kailangan siyang kumuha ng contractor to perform the obligation on his behalf. We call that substitute performance. And equivalent performance, hindi niya mismo nagawa ni debtor yung pagpintura ng bahay on December 1. Dumating yung Christmas, dumating yung New Year, walang pinturang nagawa, hindi na pinturahan yung bahay, you file for damages, equivalent performance. We do not compel the debtor to do na we do not ask the court to have him perform the task because the Constitution prohibits involuntary servitude. Prohibits voluntary servitude. Okay. So kinds of civil obligation as to perfection and extinguishment. We have pure and conditional obligation. Who can read 1179? Anyone? Yes, Ms. Tumaliwan.
Article 1179. Every obligation whose performance does not depend upon a future or uncertain event or upon a past event unknown to the parties is demandable at once. Every obligation which contains a resolutory condition shall also be demandable without prejudice to the effects of the happening of the event.
Thank you. Obligations demandable at once are called pure obligation. Example of this, contract of sale. Kapag nabayaran mo na yung kung ikaw si debtor, nabayaran mo na yung I'm sorry. Kapag ikaw nakapagbayad na in a contract of sale, you now have the obligation to demand performance kay debtor. At the same time, kapag ikaw naman na deliver mo na yung subject of sale, you now have the right to demand payment. Except of course kung merong period or term yung contract niyo. Ibang usapan na yun. It will no longer be considered a pure obligation. If the obligation does not fix a period, but from its nature and circumstances, it can be inferred that a period was intended, the court may fix the duration thereof. So ibig sabihin kapag nakalagay sa promissory note, I will pay you 100,000 when my means permit me to do so. This is one of the circumstances where the court can fix the duration of the period. So kapag sinabihan ka, pautang naman, babayaran kita pag nakaluwag-luwag, anong magiging reaction niyo dyan? Kailan ka magiging makakaluwag-luwag? Pupunta pa kayo sa korte para i-determine kung kailan yun. But it's a valid obligation. Only that maraming defect yung stipulation. Conditional obligation, the acquisition of rights as well as the extinguishment or loss of those already acquired shall depend upon the happening of the event which constitute the condition. When the fulfillment of a condition depends upon the sole will of the debtor, the conditional obligation shall be void If it depends upon the chance or upon the will of a third person, the obligation shall take effect in conformity with the provisions of this code. Example, I will give you 100,000 kapag gusto ko, kung kailan ko gusto. Is it a valid or void of contract? Void obligation? Anyone? Bibigyan kita ng 100,000 kung kailan ko gusto.
Di po, sir.
Miss Rural?
Sa akin po, hindi po siya valid, sir.
Why? Mr. Montserrat?
Sir, yun nga po, based nga po dun po sa Article 1182 po, magiging void po siya because yung pong condition po is nakadepend lang po dun po sa sole will po ng debtor. Ang sinabi po dun po sa situation is kung kailan niya po gusto. Tama po ba yun?
Yes, correct. It depends on the sole will of the debtor. So magkaiba yung babayaran kita pag nakaluwag-luwag na ako sa babayaran kita kung kailan ko gusto. I will pay you when my means permit me to do so. It's a valid obligation. I will pay you whenever I want to. Is a void obligation. Okay? Ayan. Potestative condition is one which depends solely on the will of one party. I will give you 100,000 if you transfer to another if you transfer from the province to Metro Manila. Valid or not? I will give you 100,000 if you transfer your residence from the province to Metro Manila. Anyone? Is it a valid or void obligation? Miss Valencia, bakit void?
Sir, impossible po kasing mangyari po yun.
Bakit impossible mangyari? Impossible mag-transfer ng residence from the province to Manila?
Mali ko pala yung pag...
It's a valid because this type of potestative condition depends on the will of the creditor. What is void is the one that depends solely on the will of the debtor. So kung suspensive potestative, void siya because it depends on the will of the debtor. Pero kapag suspensive potestative pero will ng creditor, valid siya. Because it is still the creditor who will demand the performance of the obligation. Gets na po ba?
Yes,
Kapag, okay, thank you. Kapag sole will ng debtor, suspensive potestative, void. Suspensive potestative pero will ng creditor, valid siya. Okay? Casual condition is one where the condition is made to depend upon a third person or upon chance. I will give you my land in Florida Blanca if Mount Pinatubo erupts this year. I will give you my land in Quezon City if Mount Mayon will erupt 1 year from now. Kapag hindi naman siya kapag hindi, if after 1 year from now, Mount Mayon will not erupt, extinguish ng obligation. But the question is it a valid obligation? Yes. And we call that what? Casual condition. Okay? Mixed condition is one which depends partly upon the will of one of the parties and partly on either chance or will of the third person. So there are two classes of impossible condition: impossible in fact and impossible in law. Impossible in fact, I will give you 100,000 kapag nagpakita sa atin si Superman. So wala namang Superman unless merong cosplay Superman. Yun. Impossible in fact siya, and impossible in law. What is impossible in law? Kapag the obligation attaches to an illegal condition. I will give you 100,000 kapag binaril mo si A. I will give you my car if you die after your death. Impossible in law na siya. So the effect is it only annuls the obligation which depends upon them. Ibig sabihin, if there's stipulation ng contract, ganito, I will give you 100,000 and I will give you 100,000 today, and if tomorrow Mount Pinatubo erupts or Mount Mayon erupts, I will give you another 100,000. Alin doon ang valid and alin doon ang valid condition at alin ang impossible condition? I'm sorry. I will give you 100,000 today, and I will give you another 100,000 tomorrow if you transform into Superman. Ganun na lang.
So yung mag-transform as Superman kasi parang imposible mangyari.
Impossible in fact or impossible in law?
In fact po, sir.
Okay. Thank you. We move on. So again, kinds of conditional obligation. We have suspensive condition. Who can read this one? Kumabig, can you read 1187, please? Mami, Winsal?
Sorry. Article 1187. The effect of a conditional obligation to
Camera,
give.
please.
Sorry.
Sige, okay lang. Are you not feeling well?
Yes.
Sige. Let me call Miss Francisco.
Hello po, sir.
Yes po. Camera please, can you read 1187?
Um, the effects of conditional obligation to give, once the condition has been fulfilled, shall retroact to the day of the constitution of the obligation. Nevertheless, when the obligation imposes reciprocal prestation upon the parties, the fruits and interest during the pendency of the condition shall be deemed to have been mutually compensated. If the obligation is unilateral, the debtor shall appropriate the fruits and interest received, unless from the nature and circumstances of the obligation it should be inferred that the intention of the person constituting the same was different.
Thank you. This article actually refers to suspensive condition. Although, if you can notice, there is no retroactivity with respect to the fruits. The fruits are deemed to cancel out each other. If only one of the thing produces fruits, then there is no obligation to deliver the fruits. Kasi nakalagay dito, if the obligation is unilateral, the debtor shall appropriate the fruits and interest received, unless from the nature and circumstances of the obligation it should be inferred that the intention of the person constituting the same was different. Okay? Suspensive condition, the happening of the event gave rise to the obligation. We will um, we will we will compare it with resolutory condition, where the happening of the event will extinguish the obligation. Example, suspensive condition. I will give you 100,000 on your 18th birthday. Is it a suspensive condition or resolutory condition? Anyone? Anyone? I will give you 100,000 on your 18th birthday. Miss Mendoza, bakit suspensive?
May obligation akong ibigay yung 100,000 pag nag-birthday na po siya.
The happening of the event gives birth to the obligation. Ibig sabihin, the obligation is not demandable until the happening of the event, which is on the 18th birthday. Okay? Resolutory condition, example, I will let you use my car until your 20th birthday. So, the happening of the event will extinguish the obligation. On your 20th birthday, wala ka ng obligation, wala ka ng right sa car. The owner of the car, which is the debtor, can now demand that you return the car. However, as of today, you as the creditor can now demand the use of the car. Kasi sabi sa'yo, I will let you use my car until your 20th birthday. Na gets niyo yung difference?
Yes po.
Okay. Example pa. Let's move on. Okay. With a term or period. Let me ask you, passing your CPA board exam, is it with an obligation with a condition or with a term?
With the condition po.
Sige, pull tayo. Sino nag-examine with a term? One, two, three, four. Wala. Dalawa. Si Miss Rura. Ako sinabi ko dati, passing the bar exam is not a condition but with a peer. Kasi one of the pag sinabing term, one of the characteristic dito is that it is future, hindi pa nangyayari, and certain mangyayari. So ako, I believe in myself na papasa ako sa bar exam. Kaya magiging abogado ako. Sana kayo din. Sana yung pagpasa nyo sa board exam is certain. Dapat every time you study your subjects, dapat nasa mindset nyo na I'm doing this para pumasa ng board exam. Hindi para pumasa ng RFBT, hindi para pumasa ng mga subjects ngayon, ng auditing theory, auditing problems, hindi para makagraduate, hindi para maging CPA. Although sa point of view ng ibang tao, passing the board exam is a condition kasi uncertain siya. Siyempre, uncertain yun sa ibang tao kasi hindi naman siya yung gagawa. Tama ba? Who can read 1180? Yes, Mr. Enriquez.
When the debtor finds himself to pay
Open your
when
camera, please.
Okay po. When the debtor finds himself to pay when his means permit him to do so, the obligation shall be deemed to be with a period, subject to the provisions of Article 1197.
Okay. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. Mangungutang ako sa iyo, babayaran ko kapag nakaluwag-luwag na ako. It is with a period. Kasi darating naman talaga yung panahon na makakaluwag-luwag naman talaga siya. Okay? So, so much with that. A term is, or a period, is future and certain event upon which the demandability of an obligation depends. Okay, so future, certain, and possible. So it can be suspensive term, or resolutory term. Suspensive, just like with suspensive condition, suspensive term, the arrival of which will make the obligation demandable. Resolutory term, example of suspensive term, upon the death of my grandmother, upon the death of your grandmother, I promise to give you 50,000 pesos as monthly support, 50,000 pesos monthly as your allowance until you reach the age of majority, or until you reach the age of 18. So this is a kind of suspensive term. Resolutory term, the arrival of which will extinguish the obligation, the period after which the performance must terminate. I will give you 10,000 monthly allowance until you graduate uh, your course in accountancy. So hangga't hindi pa hindi pa ka nakaka-graduate, well, your graduation is future, it is certain, and it is possible. So until hindi pa kayo nakaka-graduate, makaka-receive kayo ng 10,000 pesos. This is a kind of this is an example of an obligation with a resolutory term. Question?
Wala po, sir.
Malinaw ha? It is presumed for the benefit of both. Hindi siya benefit lang ni debtor, hindi lang siya benefit for ni creditor. So kapag may nakita kayo sa problem, A, B, and C promise to pay X 20,000 pesos on December 31, 2023. The term is for the benefit of both A, B, and C and X as debtor and creditor. Okay? If the term is for the benefit of the creditor can demand performance anytime, but the debtor cannot insist on payment before the period. If the term is for the benefit of the creditor cannot demand performance anytime, but the debtor can insist on performance anytime. When will the debtor loses the benefit of the period? Who can read 1198? Anyone? Yes, Miss Baba.
Article 1198, the debtor shall use every right to make use of the period. After the obligation has been contracted, he becomes insolvent unless he gives a guarantee or security for the debt. When he does not furnish to the creditor the guarantees or securities which he has promised, when by his own acts he has impaired said guarantees or securities after their establishment, and when through a fortuitous event they disappear, unless he immediately gives new ones equally satisfactory. When the debtor violates any undertaking in consideration of which the debtor agreed to the period, and when the debtor attempts to abscond.
Ano ibig sabihin ng abscond? Anyone?
Sir,
Yes. Sino nagsalita?
parang ano po, si Gador po. Parang, sorry. Tumakas po.
Tumakas. Yes. In the legal, layman's term, abscond, tumakas. Pero when the debtor attempts to abscond, ibig sabihin, tumakas siya sa performance ng obligation. And when it becomes apparent that the performance of the obligation becomes impossible. Okay? So effect nito, the obligation becomes immediately due and demandable, and the obligation is converted into a pure obligation. Okay? So kahit December 31 pa yung due date, kapag nag-manifest itong mga circumstances dito sa 1198, ikaw na creditor, you can already demand the performance of the obligation. And it's converted into a pure obligation. Okay? Question po? So obligation, according to the plurality of objects, we have simple obligation, multiple obligations, conjunctive, alternative, and facultative. Again, object dito, hindi siya yung subject ng obligation, kundi yung prestation ng obligation. Okay? Conjunctive obligation, where the debtor must perform more than one prestation. Alternative obligation, where the debtor must perform any of several prestation. When several objects due, the fulfillment of one is sufficient. Generally, the debtor choose which one. And facultative, where only one thing is due, but the debtor has reserved the right to substitute with another. Election here is never granted to creditor. Conjunctive, example nito, where the debtor must perform more than one prestation. I will give you my car, I will give you 100,000, and I will let you use my condo in Makati. Madaming prestation, madaming object. Okay? Alternative obligation, I will give you 100,000 or I will give you my car on your graduation day. Kapag si creditor binigyan ng 100,000, does the creditor still have the right to demand for the car? Anyone? I will give you my car, or I will give you 100,000 on your graduation day. On graduation day, debtor gave the creditor 100,000. Question: does the creditor have the right to demand for the car? Miss Cornejo?
Sir, try lang po.
Sige po.
No po. Kasi ang sinabi na...
Open your camera po.
Ayun, okay na po ba? Ayun.
Okay.
No po. Kasi ang sinabi naman po is 100,000 or yung car. So, either lang po sa dalawang. Hindi naman po sinabing 100,000 and car.
Okay. Very good. So again, the fulfillment of one is sufficient. And who has the right to choose? Miss Cornejo?
Yung ano po, yung debtor po.
The debtor, unless the right to choose is given to the creditor. More on that as we go along with our discussion. Okay? Facultative, where only one thing is due, but the debtor has reserved the right to substitute it with another. I will give you my car on your graduation day, or I can give you 100,000 instead. Na nawala yung na bankrupt si debtor, naubusan siya ng pera, nawala yung 100,000 niya. Binigay niya kay creditor yung car. Question, can the creditor demand for 100,000 instead? Madaming absent ngayon, 43 lang tayo. Miss Kureg, can you answer my question please? Wala? Cascaro? Miss Cascaro? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes po.
Sorry nag-brown out. Pasensya. Umulan ba sa inyo? Lakas na ulan dito. Asa na tayo? Wait lang. Wait lang guys ha. Dito na ba tayo?
Yes po.
Hello?
Yes po, sir.
Opo, sir.
Okay, where only one thing is due, but the debtor has reserved the right to substitute it with another. It's called a facultative obligation. I will give you my car on your graduation day, or I can give you my 100,000 pesos. Ano yung different? Ano yung difference niya sa alternative obligation? Who can differentiate? Can you try, Miss Aldana? Can you differentiate alternative from facultative? Miss Bryce, Sophia? Are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, camera please. Okay, kapag alternative obligation, several objects are due. 100,000, yung car, or yung condo. However, sa facultative, only one thing is due. It's just that yung debtor, meron siyang option na is mag-substitute, kumuha ng ibang subject ng obligation as a substitute. Okay? So, balik tayo. Alternative obligation, on your graduation day, I will give you my car, my condo in Makati, or 100,000. Kapag binigyan ka ng kotse, if it's an alternative obligation, if I give you my car, you no longer have the right to demand for the 100,000 pesos and the condo in Makati. However, sa facultative facultative obligation, I will give you my car on your graduation day. Kapag nawala yung 100,000, I will give you my car on your graduation day, or I can give you 100,000 pesos. Kapag nawala yung 100,000 pesos, wala siyang effect sa obligation, since the only thing that is due is the car, the car to be delivered on your graduation day. Okay? However, kapag yung on graduation day nawala yung car, the debtor can deliver 100,000 pesos, which is valid kasi it's a facultative obligation. Okay? Dito, hindi pwedeng pumili ang creditor. Sa facultative obligation, the right to choose is always with the debtor. Okay? Question po? Malinaw? Example pa, or we can move na? Alright, let's dig deeper. Alternative obligation. A person alternatively bound by different prestations shall completely perform one of them. The creditor cannot be compelled to receive part of one and part of the other undertaking. So ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, several objects being due, the fulfillment of one is sufficient. Okay? The right of choice belongs to the debtor unless it has been expressly granted to the creditor. The debtor shall have no right to choose those prestations which are impossible, unlawful, or which could not have been the object of the obligation. All right? Situation. I will give you my car, 100,000 pesos. Sorry. I will give you my car, one sack of rice, and one sack of potato. Lumagyo na naiwan na lang is one sack of rice. 42 is 22 ha. Naiwan na lang one sack of rice. Can the creditor demand the delivery of one sack of potato? Who can answer? Wala. The answer is no. When only one prestation is left or object is left, the debtor may perform the one that is left. If the choice is limited through the creditor's own acts, the debtor can ask for resolution plus damages. Okay? And if everything is lost through the debtor's fault, the latter is liable to indemnify the creditor for damages. Okay? Question? Wala. If some things are lost through the debtor's fault, the debtor can still choose from the remaining. So kung nawala yung example natin ng sa example natin, car, um, one sack of rice, one sack of potato. Nawala yung one sack of potato, although may kasalanan naman si debtor, um, ang option na lang sa kanya ay pumili whether to deliver the car or the one sack of rice. Okay? If all are lost or through fortuitous event, bumaha, nagkaroon ng undoy, nawala yung one sack of rice, nawala yung one sack of potato, binaha din yung car, hindi na siya pwedeng i-deliver. Like, totally wrecked na yung car. Binaha. Liable pa rin ba si debtor? Anyone? We go back to the rule on 42.7. Okay? 42.7, kapag walang fault si debtor, extinguish ng obligation. Pero kung ang subject ng obligation is to deliver a specific car, nagkaroon ng 42.7, liable pa rin ba si debtor?
Hindi na po.
Sino yun? Specific car?
Hindi na po, attorney.
Is Valencia?
Since specific po, hindi na impossible na pong mai-deliver since specific. Hindi po siya generic. Kung generic po kasi pwede pa pong ma-substitute.
Parang baliktad. Pag specific,
Pag specific po, hindi na po liable.
Okay.
Fortuitous event po. And pag generic naman po, pwede pa po um, magkaroon ng other object po na pwedeng i-deliver po ng debtor po kay creditor po.
Yes, very good. Genus does not perish, or generic thing does not perish. Okay. Specific, specific car, nagkaroon ng 42.7, extinguished ng obligation. Pero kung nakalagay is 2020 Montero Sport, specific ba siya or generic?
Generic.
Generic. Kasi maraming 2020 Montero Sport. Kung 2020 Montero Sport with plate number ABC1234, specific pa rin ba siya? Ay, generic pa rin ba siya?
Specific na po.
Specific na po. Very good. Okay. If all but one are lost through the fault of the debtor and the last one was lost through 42.7, what is the effect? Like 42.7, I'm sorry, car, one sack of rice, one sack of potato. Nawala yung car at one sack of rice dahil sa fault ni debtor. Nagkaroon ng bagyo, nawala din yung one sack of potato. Ano yung effect? Anyone? The obligation is also extinguished kasi ang effect kapag nawala yung, although at fault si debtor, nawala yung dalawang option, nawala yung car, nawala yung cart, nawala yung one sack of rice, meron pa rin siyang option to deliver the one sack of potato. Which the happening of that, kapag na-perform niya yung delivery ng one sack of potato, it's, fulfilled na yung obligation niya. However, nagkaroon ng 42.7, nawala yung one sack of potato, ang effect nito, extinguish na rin yung obligation. And the creditor cannot demand for the delivery of one sack of potato nor the car or the one sack of rice. Okay? Question?
Wala.
What if the choice is with the creditor? Who can read? Yes, Lorely. Is correct. Yeah. Camera, please. And sorry, can you open your camera, please? Hindi ko makita. Sige, never mind. May problema yata yung wifi ko. Okay, thank you. So let's dissect this 1205, Article 1205. If one or some are lost through 42.7, the creditor may choose from those remaining. So let's go back. One sack of rice, one sack of potato, one sack of, or one car, nawala yung car by 42.7. Pinili ni creditor i-deliver yung one sack of rice. Nag-deliver dineliver naman siya ni debtor. What is the effect? The obligation is extinguished. Kasi valid naman yung pagpili niya. Hindi na siya dinemand yung delivery ng car kasi nawala na siya sa option. Hindi naman kasalanan ni debtor na magkaroon ng bagyo or 42.7. Okay? So the creditor may choose from those remaining. That's number one. If one or some are lost through the debtor's fault, yes, Miss Lamy? Sorry? Hindi po kita maintindihan. Ano daw? Hello?
Napindot lang daw po ata, sir.
Sorry. Okay. If one or some are lost through the debtor's fault, the creditor has choice from the remainder or the value of the things lost plus damages. Okay? So, lagi dito yung damages. Fault ni debtor, nawala yung car, pinili niya yung car. So, pwede niyang i-demand yung value nung i-deliver sa kanya yung value ng car. Let's say 500,000 plus damages. Okay? If all are lost through the debtor's fault, the choice of the creditor shall fall upon the price of any of them with indemnity of damages. For damages. So parang pareho lang tong B and C. If some are lost through the creditor's fault, the creditor may choose from the remainder. A, B, and C, nawala, I'm sorry, car, one sack of rice, one sack of potato, nawala yung one sack of potato dahil kasalanan naman ni creditor. The creditor may choose from the remainder. So pwede na siyang pumili kung alin sa dalawa. Kung gusto niya deliver yung one sack of rice or yung car. If all are lost through 42.7, again, ano yung effect nito? 42.7. Anyone? Miss Tan? Hello? Can you hear me, guys?
Yes po, sir.
Miss Tan, can you answer the question, please?
Hello, sir. Pwede po paulit ng question. Mahina po kasi internet kanina.
Okay. If all are lost through 42's event, what is the effect?
Mag-choose lang po among the remainder yung ano, kung alin po yung i-deliver na lang po.
Hindi. I mean, lahat na ano, walang natira. All are lost.
Extinguish.
Very good. The obligation is also extinguished. What about if all are lost through the creditor's fault?
Extinguish na.
Extinguished na rin. Very good. Guys, can we have like a 10-minute break? Or 15? Yeah, 10-minute break lang. Naglolo ko ang internet ko. Ayusin ko lang. I'll be back 2:52. Okay, thank you. Hello? Let's continue. So if the choice is with the creditor, Article 1205 is applicable, and this rule is also will also apply to obligations to do or not to do in case one, some, or all of the prestations should become impossible. Okay? Question? Let's go to rights and obligations of multiple parties. Who can read joint letter A? Miro? Ah, okay. Miss Valencia?
Hello po. A joint obligation in which
Please open your camera, please.
open na po.
Okay, thank you.
A joint obligation is one in which each of the debtors is liable only for a proportionate part of the debt, or each creditor is entitled only to a proportionate part of the credit. In joint obligation, there are as many obligations as there are debtors multiplied by the numbers of the creditors.
Continue.
There are three kinds of joint obligation. First one is the active joint, where the obligation is joint on the debt on the creditor side. The, the second one is the passive joint, where the obligation is joint on the debtor side. And last, multiple joint, where there are multiple parties on each side of joint obligation.
Okay, thank you. The joint obligation has been termed as mancomunada or mancomunada simple or pro rata. So, ibig sabihin, kapag yung phrase ay we promise to pay by use of two or more signers, these create a joint obligation. We ano da we differentiate that with a promissory note. I promise to pay. I promise to pay, pero ang nakapirma A, B, and C, it is not a joint obligation but rather a solidary obligation. However, kapag ang nakalagay sa promissory note ay we promise to pay, signed by A, B, and C, it is a joint obligation. Okay? Careful po tayo sa wordings ng problem. Alright? Kapag ang question ay A, B, and C promise to pay X, Y, and Z 900,000 pesos, the presumption is that it is a joint obligation. Joint C debtor and joint C creditor. Exception, kapag stipulated na solidary si debtor at solidary si creditor. Okay? Question? What is the presumption if there are multiple debtors or multiple creditors? Anyone? The presumption is that, yes, Ms. Lumig?
Yung presumption po, sir, is the obligation is joint po.
Thank you.
Ah, kapag solidarity naman po kasi dapat po naka-express po siya.
Okay, very good. Um, Careful tayo ha. Kahit joint si debtor or kahit solidary si debtor, pero walang provision, walang sinabi sa problem na solidary ang creditor, although multiple ang creditors, hindi ibig sabihin solidary na rin si creditor. Okay? A, B, and C are solidary creditors of X, Y, and Z for 900,000 pesos. Magkano ang pwedeng demand ni X kay A? Anyone? A, B, and C, 900,000 solidary debtors. Ang creditors ay si X, Y, and Z. Question, magkano ang pwedeng i-demand ni X kay A?
Yung buo po, sir.
Miss Valencia?
Yes po. Yung buo po na obligation po. Since solidary po.
Since solidary yung debtors. Pero magkano yung okay. Magkano yung share niya sa obligation? $300,000 lang kasi joint creditor sila. Di ba?
Yes po, yes po.
Okay. So si A, si B, and si C, liable sila for 900,000 kasi solidary sila. So any one of them can pay 900,000. Pero si X, si Y, and si Z, since ang presumption is joint obligation, so joint creditor sila. So ang pwede niya lang i-demand kay X, kay Y, at kay Z ay kung magkano lang yung share niya. Malinaw?
Yes po.
Okay, very good. Balik question, may question po ba before we dig deeper? Alright. So what is the effect of joint liability? Anyone? Kung nagbasa po nito? Yes, Mr. Maliwan. Thank you.
The effects of the joint liability. 1. The demand by one creditor upon one debtor produces the effects of default only with respect to the creditor who demanded and the debtor on whom the demand was made, but not with respect to the others.
Open your camera, please.
Ay, sorry po, sir.
Okay.
Ulitin ko po, sir.
Kahit, okay, sure.
Ulitin ko na lang po, sir. So,
Sige.
effects of joint liability. 1. The demand by one creditor upon one debtor produces the effects of default only with respect to the creditor whom demanded and the debtor on whom the demand was made, but not with respect to the others. 2. The interruption of the prescription by the judicial demand of one creditor. Judicial demand of one creditor upon a debtor does not benefit the other creditors nor interrupt the prescription as to other debtors. On the same principle, a partial payment or acknowledgement made by one of the several joint debtors does not stop the running of this statute, sir. Tama ba?
Yeah, statute
of limitations as to others. Number 3, the vices of each obligation arising from the personal defect of particular debtor or creditor does not affect the obligation or rights of the others. Lastly, the insolvency of a debtor does not increase the responsibility of his co-debtors, nor does it authorize a creditor to demand anything from his co-creditors.
Very good. Um, uh, let's dig deeper. The demand by one creditor upon one debtor produces the effects of default only with respect to the creditor who demanded and the debtor on whom the demand was made, but not with respect to the others. A, B, and C joint debtor to X, Y, and Z. Z demanded payment from A. Hindi nakapagbayad si A. Si B at si C, hindi rin sila nagbayad. Sino yung sino sa tatlong debtors ang in default of the obligation to pay? Si A ba? Si A in default ba siya? Or si A and B? Or si A, si B, or si C? Anyone? For a debtor to be in default, a creditor must send a demand letter or demand the creditor demand the debtor to perform the obligation. So sa problem, si X demanded A to pay the amount due. It was only A who was demanded by X. Question, who was in default? Is A or A and B or A, B, and C? Anyone? It's only A who's in default. Kasi siya lang naman na binigyan ng demand. Kasi joint liability ito eh. Joint debtors ito eh. There are as many debt as there are many debtors. Okay? So si B at si C, since hindi naman sila binigyan ng demand ng creditor, so hindi pa sila in default. Okay? All right, thank you. Now, number 2, the interruption of prescription by the judicial demand of one creditor upon a debtor does not benefit the other creditors nor interrupt the prescription as to the other debtors. On the same principle, a partial payment or acknowledgement made by one of several joint debtors does not stop the running of the statute of limitations as to the others. One of the mode of extinguishment of obligation is prescription. Nasa batas na kapag ang utang ay hindi nabayaran, sum of money, hindi nabayaran for 10 years, it's no longer it is no longer a civil obligation but rather a moral obligation. So meaning hindi mo na siya somehow it has an effect of extinguishing an obligation where the creditor can no longer demand payment from the debtor. How do you toll the running of prescription? By sending a demand letter. So on the 9th year, hindi pa nakakapagbayad si debtor, nagpadala si creditor ng demand letter kay A debtor, going back to our example, A, B, and C, plus X, Y, and Z, 900,000. On the ninth year, nagpadala si creditor X kay debtor A ng demand letter for payment of the amount due. Ang may interrupt lang ng running of period for prescription is only A. So ibig sabihin, on the ninth year na napadalan siya ng demand letter ni X, may interrupt yung running of prescription. So ibig sabihin, from ninth year, magka-count ulit ng another 10 years. Okay? However, si B and C, na wala namang na-receive na demand letter, magko-continue yung running ng period until such time na mag-prescribe yung obligation. At on the same tenor, si Y and si Z na hindi nagpadala ng anything sa mga debtors, hindi na rin sila makakapag-demand ng performance ng obligation or payment of obligation after the prescription period or after the period expired or prescribed. Malinaw ba? Thank you, Miss Madlang Bayan. Yes po, Miss Lamy.
Sir, napipindot lang po. Nag-solo ko po kasi.
Okay.
Sir, pwedeng paulit po.
Okay. Simplihan natin. Prescription are one of the mode of extinguishing an obligation. Mode of extinguishment of obligation. May interrupt lang yung running of prescription by sending a demand letter to perform the specific prestation or object of the obligation. Example, sum of money. A, B, and C, 900,000 payable to X, Y, and Z. On the ninth year, 10 years ang prescription ng sum of money, no? Promissory note. On the ninth year, si X, nagpadala siya ng judicial demand letter kay A to pay the amount due. Ngayon, ang sinasabi ng number 2, may interrupt lang yung period to run for yung period para mag-prescribe yung obligation to demand the performance will only be applicable to A. Hindi magbe-benefit dito ay hindi makaka-apekto kay B at kay C. So kung after 10 years, nag-prescribe na yung obligation, si A na lang ang merong utang. Kasi napadalan siya ng demand letter. On the same tenor, si A, on default lang siya kay X. Kasi si X lang ang nagpadala ng demand letter. Si Y tsaka si Z na walang ginawa, prescribe na rin yung right nila to demand performance of the obligation. Prescribe na yung right nila kay X, ay kay A, kay B, at kay C. Kasi wala silang ginawa. So, on the ninth year, ang may utang na lang dito ay si A at si X. Okay? Doon, no? May papuso. Thank you. Sana all may puso. Binibigyan ng puso. Okay. Number 3. The vices of each obligation arising from the personal defect of the particular debtor or creditor does not affect the obligation or rights of the others. In the same tenor, the insolvency of a debtor does not increase the responsibility of his co-debtors, nor does it authorize a creditor to demand anything from his co-creditors. Ano ba yung mga vices of obligation? Incapacity. Ayan, insolvency. Um, moral interdiction. Um, minority. Si A, B, and C joint debtor kay X, Y, and Z for 900,000. Si A, minor. Si B, insolvent. Magkano ang pwedeng i-demand ni X, Y, and Z joint creditor din sila? Magkano ang pwede niyang i-demand kay X? Magkano ang pwedeng i-demand ni X kay C? Anyone? Yes, Miss Cornejo?
Sir, try lang po. 300K pa rin po.
Bakit po?
Kasi hindi naman po niya responsibility yung dalawang yung dalawa, yung A and B.
Very good. Ngayon, si X, magkano ang nagpadala siya ng demand letter kay A. Magkano ang pwede niyang masingil kay A?
300 pa rin po. Ay, apo, kasi si X lang naman yung nagpadala ng demand letter. Tama ba?
Zero kasi minor si A. Di ba pag minor ang invalid yung contract kapag minor ang isang party. Well, more on that pag nag-contracts tayo. So, si A, pwede niyang erase na defense na minor siya nung nagpirmahan ng kontrata. Kaya, hindi siya pwedeng magbayad ng share niya sa joint obligation. Okay? So, si Z, nag-send siya ng demand letter kay C to pay for 600,000 since sabi niya insolvent daw si B or bankrupt si B. Kaya sabi niya, since magkakaibigan naman kayo, bayaran mo yung share ni B. Pwede ba yon?
Hindi po.
Hindi. Kasi joint siya. Pero kung solidary siya, malalaman natin. May question pa po sa joint liability? So again, joint liability, there are as many debt as there are many creditors and many debtors and many creditors. Okay? Kapag solidary, one for all for one sila. Ito, solidary obligation. Who can read? Anyone? Miss, yung nauna, sino yung nauna? Ruiz ba yun? Cruiz. Sorry.
Solidary obligation. A solidary obligation is one in which the debtor
Camera,
is
please.
liable.
Open your camera, please.
Naka-open na po. Loading lang po ata, sir.
Sige, sige. Okay.
A solidary obligation is one in which the debtor is liable for the entire obligation or each creditor is entitled to demand the whole obligation. There are three kinds of solidarity. First, active solidarity, where there are several creditors with one debtor in a solidary obligation. Second, passive solidarity, where there is one creditor with several debtors solidary bound. Third, mixed solidarity, where there are several creditors and several debtors in a solidary obligation. There is solidary obligation in the following. A. When the obligation expressly so states, stipulation by parties. B. When a will expressly makes charging or a condition in solidum. C. When the law requires, crimes, conspiracy, act or one is act of all, in torts, joint tortfeasors. The liability of joint tortfeasors, which include all persons who command, instigate, promote, encourage, advise, countenance, cooperate in, aid or abet the commission of a tort, or who approve of it after it is done if done for their benefit. The nature of the obligation requires solidarity, and E. Imposed by final judgment upon several defendants.
All right. So, um, solidary obligation again. One for all for one sila. Para in layman's term ba. Parang ganun. So, A, B, and C, solidary debtor kay X. So, si X can demand, for 300,000. X can demand 300,000 from any one of them. From either from A, from B, or from C. Okay? Nakalagay dito, when the obligation expressly so states, stipulation by parties, because solidary obligation is not presumed. So kapag nakalaga again, it's only joint obligation that is presumed. Kapag walang nakalagay sa problem na solidarily liable sila or solidary creditor sila, do not assume na solidary ang obligation. Although maraming party ang obligation or maraming debtor at maraming creditor. Okay? On the same tenor, kapag solidary si debtor, hindi ibig sabihin solidary na si creditor kapag marami ang creditor. Okay? Kailangan expressly stipulated. Nakalagay sa promissory note, I promise to pay X 200,000, signed A and B. What type of obligation is that? Anyone? Isaldana? Dayan? Okay, solidary. Yes. I promise to pay, signed by more than one person, solidary. We promise to pay, signed by more than one person, joint obligation. Okay? Careful po tayo. When the law requires, so kapag sa crime, si A, B, and C, criminally liable sila. So, ibig sabihin, solidary liable sila to render the penalty. Act of one is the act of all kapag merong conspiracy. And if the nature of the obligation requires solidarity. Example nito, kapag sa event, wedding event, so si wedding coordinator at si wedding planner, ang grupo nila, pati si host, wedding host, lahat sila kailangan mag-perform on that wedding day. Unless yung task nila is post-wedding. Hindi naman kasi ibig sabihin na yung grupo na to, wedding day requires a solidary performance of the debtors, of the parties. Kasi hindi naman ibig sabihin, hindi naman pwede na si photographer magpe-perform lang siya ng part niya after the wedding. Si host, hindi naman pwede na mag-host siya before the wedding. So kailangan solidary pa rin yung performance nila. When imposed by final judgment upon several defendants. Question po sa solidary obligation? Let's have a problem. A, B, and C, 900,000 solidary creditors, X, Y, and Z. Magkano ang pwedeng i-demand ni X kay A? Anyone? Wala. You can try. Patricia Marquez, 900K. Bakit? Yes, Loring Joy.
Yung whole na amount po, sir.
Ha?
Yung whole na amount po, sir.
Yung whole na amount. A, B, and C, 900,000. Solidary, sinabi ko ba na solidary debtor sila? So again ha, do not assume na solidary ang creditor at ang debtor. Do not assume na solidary ang debtor kapag solidary din ang creditor. Okay? So solidary yung debtor, solidary yung creditor. Although pwede niyang i-demand yung whole amount, pero he can only demand kung ano lang yung share ni debtor kung joint yung debtor. Siya as solidary creditor can collect as much as 900,000. So, pwede siyang mag-collect kay A ng 300,000, kay B ng 300,000, at kay C ng 300,000. Since solidary creditor naman sila. Naintindihan? Pero kung solidary debtor for 900,000 at solidary din yung creditor, pwedeng mag-collect ng 900,000 si X kay C. Na ano nyo yung difference? Malinaw? Thank you, Miss Mendoza. What about the others? Ang ito may medyo favorite to ng board exam. So I'm not going to to move hangga't hindi malinaw. Okay. Do not assume na kapag si creditor ay solidary, solidary na rin si debtor. On the same note, do not assume na solidary si creditor kapag solidary si debtor. Tulad ng sinabi ko kanina, A, B, and C, 900,000, solidary creditor, X, Y, and Z. How much can X collect from C? The answer is only 300,000. Why? Because joint debtor sila. Kasi hindi sinabi sa problem na solidary debtor sila. Okay? So si X bilang solidary creditor can collect as much as 900,000. Pero makakakolekta lang siya ng share ng bawat debtor since there are as many debt as there are as many joint debtors. So makakakolekta siya ng 300,000 kay A, 300,000 kay B, at 300,000 kay C. Entitled ba siya sa 900,000? Yes, kasi solidary creditor sila. Okay? It's a different story kapag si A, B, and C solidary debtors. Kay X, Y, and C na solidary creditor. Dito, si X, pwede siyang magkolekta ng as much as 900,000 kay A. Pwede rin siyang magkolekta ng as much as 900,000 kay B or kay C. Pero kapag nagbayad na ng 900,000 si A, extinguish na ang obligation. Okay? Malinaw po? Thank you. Let's move on. Now as to performance. Divisible obligation. This has something to do with the performance of the prestation, not to the thing. Okay? So hindi ibig sabihin na kapag yung nakalagay sa problem, 100,000, AOB 100,000 payable on December 31, 2023. Is it a divisible obligation? Anyone? It is indivisible obligation. Kasi pag binayaran ni A si B ng 50,000, it's an invalid performance because ang utang is buong 100,000. Okay? The thing may be divisible, but the obligation may still be indivisible. Example, obligation to deliver 100 sacks of jasmine rice. Divisible obligation is one susceptible of partial performance, and indivisible obligation is one that is that must be performed in one act. So ang test of divisibility dito is whether it is susceptible of partial performance? Question? So, factors to determine whether obligation is divisible or not, intent of the parties, object or purpose of the stipulation, nature of the thing, and of course, provision of law affecting the prestation. Example nito, provisions of law, taxes. 'Di ba? Hindi pwedeng pagkasweldo mo sa 15 or sa katapusan, hindi mo naman pwedeng sabihin na yung income tax ko hatiin ko na next ano ko na lang bayaran. Indivisible siya. Okay. Let's move on. Who can read Article 1231? Mr. Montserrat?
Article 1231. Obligations
Open
are
your camera,
extinct.
please.
Ay, sorry.
Thank
Article
you.
1231. Obligations are extinguished by number 1, payment or performance. Number 2, loss of the thing due. Number 3, condonation or remission of the debt. Number 4, confusion or merger of the rights of creditor and debtor. Number 5, compensation. 6, novation. Other causes of extinguishments of obligations such as annulment, rescission, fulfillment of a resolutory condition, and prescription are governed elsewhere in this code.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to performance. Sorry. Yeah, payment or performance. Ang lahat ba ng uh, obligation can be extinguished by payment or performance? Yes, Miss Lami.
No po sir. Yung obligation po pwede rin po siyang ma-extinguish kapag na may loss of the findo po or kapag may mga remission, condonation po. Mga compensation din po pwede siyang ma-extinguish at novation at saka confusion po or merger din po.
Very good. Or by fortuitous event without, again, the fault of the debtor, or the debtor is not in delay, or specific thing yung subject ng obligation. So, payment or performance, ang mahalaga lang dito, partial performance is no performance at all unless applying the principle of quantum merit, or uh, it's being accepted by the creditor, or substantial yung performance ni debtor without any bad faith, or substantial performance in good faith. Uh, Persons who always pay are called payer or pay. It's not always the debtor. Why? Because there are provisions in the law that a guarantor or a surety can pay the the amount due. In what instance where a person doesn't have the freedom to dispose of his property, receivership, civil interdiction, if you are serving a um, penalty with uh, an accessory penalty that includes civil interdiction, you cannot dispose of your property. So you cannot make do of your performance in an obligation. And of course, those ordered by the court to retain the property. Next, we have special forms of payment. We have dation, application, tender of payment, or cession, or consignation, and cession. Dation in payment, when a thing is delivered and ownership thereof is delivered by the debtor to the creditor in satisfaction of his debt. Example, may utang siya ng 100,000 pesos. Instead of wala siyang pera, ang binayad niya is yung um, Honda Vios niya. In-apply yung Honda Vios as satisfaction of the debt ni debtor kay creditor. Okay? We call that dation in payment. Application of payment, the only equivalent relevant in this rule is to which debt will the payment be applied. Si A, may utang kay B for 50,000, then 100,000, and another 300,000. Pero ang pera niya lang is 150,000. So, i-apply niya yung 100,000 sa series of payment niya. As a series of debt kay B. Payment by cession or assignment. Here, the debtor would abandon or assign all of his properties to the creditor, which properties will have to be sold by the creditor, and the net proceeds should be applied to the credit. A difference itong dash na payment and payment by cession is that dito, payment by cession, the debtor, the creditor will auction, will sell or auction the properties of the debtor, and the proceeds will be applied to the amount due. While dito sa dash in payment, yung parang barter ba na kunin ko yung ino-offer ni debtor na, let's say, car, tapos i-apply ko siya sa payment, sa utang niya ng 100,000, so parang quits na. In layman's term, parang ganun. Loss of the thing due. Who has the burden of proving to the cause? It is the creditor. It's the creditor or the one claiming that it was the debtor's fault who caused the loss. Effect of the difficulty of performance. The law grants the court the power to release the debtor in whole or in part, but it did not vest the court the power to change the terms and conditions agreed upon by the parties. So ang requirement lang dito if the obligation becomes so difficult. Condonation or remission of the debt, extent of extinguishment, whether total or partial. Condonation may be partial. Kapag partial, the principal amount may not even be reduced, and the creditor will only condone the interest, or the principal amount or the interest will not be condoned, but the accessory obligation will be condoned, and therefore it will result in partial condonation. Sinasabi lang dito, 100,000, nagka-interest ng 50,000, 25,000, kapag sinabi ni creditor na, sige, 100,000 na lang yung bayad mo sa akin, this is an example of partial condonation. Confusion or merger of rights. This mode can easily be understood as by imagining the merger of banks in the past year. Ngayon, naging common na siya. Can there be confusion by operation of law? Yes, if the creditor died and only the heir is the debtor. Of course, the heir will inherit the credit, and the heir will now, who is the debtor, will now become the creditor. Therefore, there will be a meeting in one person of the character of the debtor and the creditor. So, ang example dito, kapag si heir, creditor siya ni deceased debtor. So kapag namatay na, parang namana niya na rin yung utang. So yung amount ng utang, yung obligation, nag-merge na siya into one person of the creditor. Okay? Compensation by express provision of the law. Legal compensation, ibig sabihin si debtor may utang kay creditor, A and B, debtor and creditor 100,000. At the same time, si creditor may utang din kay A ng 100,000. So magkakaroon na sila ng mag-a-apply na yung legal compensation by operation of law. So they must be mutual creditors and debtors, and must be in sum of money, or kung goods naman, they must be the same kind and quality. And both must be principal. Hindi applicable dito kung si creditor, or hindi mag-a-apply dito kung yung isa ay principal at ang isa ay guarantor lang. And they must be creditor and debtor of each other in their own right. Both debts must be due and demandable. And one of the debts must not arise from Article 1287 and 1288. So that's it for obligation. Let's have some exercises. Eight minutes. Tapusin natin to. Natural obligation can be enforced in court of law. Statement 2, a waiver of future fraud is valid. A, true, true. B, true, false. B, false, true. Or D, false, false. Anyone? D, false, false. Very good. Si Miss Kuwawi. Number 2, extinguishment of obligation happened through passage of time. Novation, payment, remission, prescription. Ms. Mendoza, very good. Prescription. When the government, upon the failure of any person to comply with health or safety regulations concerning the property, undertakes to do the necessary work, even over his objection, he shall be liable to pay the expenses. This liability or obligation arise from what source? Contract, quasi-contract, act punishable by law, or quasi-daily? Anyone? Number three. D, no? Yes, letter B, quasi-contract. Daming sumagot ng letter B. Sansa is obliged to give a specific car to Arya if she passes the CPA licensure exam on or before December 31, 2023. Is A, an obligation with a period, B, an obligation with suspensive condition, C, an obligation with resolutory condition, or D, a pure obligation? Okay, madaming sumagot ng letter B. It's a suspensive condition. Pero again, sarili nyo ha, passing the licensure exam is what? No, with a period, yes. Period siya. Evaluate the following statements. Number 5, the receipt of the principal by the creditor without reservation with respect to the interest shall give rise to the presumption that said interest has been paid. Number 2, the receipt of a later installment of a debt without reservation as to prior installments shall raise the presumption that such installment have been paid. Which of the following statements is or false? A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, 1 and 2, D, neither 1 nor 2. Both are what? Sige, which of the following statements are false? Statement number 1 or statement number 2 or both? Or none? Wala? Yes, it's letter D. Both are correct. So neither 1 nor 2 are false. Okay. Number 6, an educational institution is obliged to provide a secure environment and an atmosphere conducive to learning. This obligation arises from law, law. Yes, Miss Arnigo. It arises from your contract. Di ba? Kapag nag-enroll tayo sa isang school, we have a contract with the school that the school have this obligation to provide us a secure environment, an atmosphere conducive to learning. Kaya kapag ang school walang security guard, nagre-reklamo tayo. It's not really the law. Although, may mga provisions sa law, pero more on the contract. Number 7, X sold his car to Y for 50,000 pesos. No date was fixed for the performance of the obligation of the seller and the buyer. The obligation of X is A, to deliver the car immediately because the sale is a perfected contract. B, to deliver the car only after Y write to X demanding the delivery of the car. C, to deliver the car after Y pays X the 50,000 pesos. D, to rescind the contract because there is no time fixed for the delivery. Letter C. This is an example of what? What kind of obligation? Correct answer is letter C, not letter A. Reciprocal obligation po. Yes, reciprocal. So, the moment Y pays X 50,000, it become a pure obligation. So the letter A is not correct because to deliver the car immediately because the sale is a perfected contract. Reciprocal siya. Okay? Hindi mo siya pwedeng i-deliver agad kasi paano naman yung bayan? To deliver the car only after Y write to X demanding the delivery of the car. Hindi siya correct answer because again, reciprocal, kailangan magbayad muna. Number 8, A, B, and C secured a loan from X. The promissory note which evidences the obligation states, I promise to pay, signed by A, B, and C. The obligation is what? Yes, solidary. Kasi, ano yung nakalagay para maging siyang solidary? I promise to pay. Tapusin natin to dalawa na lang. A, B, and C are solidary debtors to X in the amount of 12,000. X then made a demand from A but was able to collect 8,000 only because X remitted a share of 4,000 pesos. How much can A collect from B and C? 12,000, 8,000, 6,000, 4,000. Wala. Kaya nyo to guys. Mabilis lang to. Kaya sumagot nito. Try lang. I will explain. D. Bakit D? Yes, the correct answer is letter D because because kahit because 8,000 na lang yung debt. 12K, ito, simple natin. A, B, and C, solidary debtors of X in the amount of 12,000. So, ang share nila sa solidary obligation is 4,000. 4,000 each. Pero si X pwedeng mag-demand ng 12,000 sa bawat isa, sa bawat debtors. Okay? Therefore, ang share ni A, ni B, and C sa 12,000 is 4,000 each, di ba? Si X, ang ginawa niya, pinatawad niya or nirimit niya yung share ni A. Pero, ang siningil niya ay si A. Kaya, ang dapat lang na ibayad ni A kay X is only 8,000. So since dalawa na lang yung utang, si B na lang tsaka si C ang may utang, yung share niya na lang yung share na lang ni B at ni C ang pwedeng makolekta ni A, which is 4,000 each. Malinaw? Malinaw ba? Yes, okay. Last, the creditor shall have a right to indemnify the damages when, through the fault of the debtor, all the things which are alternatively the object of the obligation have been lost or compliance of the obligation has been impossible. The indemnity shall be fixed on the basis of A, the value of the least expensive, B, the value of the most expensive, C, the value of the last thing which disappeared, or D, the value of the first thing which disappeared. Alternative obligation to. Sagot, letter C. Very good. Sa mga sumagot. The value of the last thing which disappeared. Okay. Madali lang pala sa inyo ang obligation eh. Pasensya na, hindi na natin na-cover yung contract. Next meeting, we'll cover contract. Kailan yung schedule exam nyo, please? Masabi na ba sa inyo?
March 28 po yung schedule po para sa RFDT po.
March 28. Okay. So, how many meeting pa before March 28?
Isa na lang.
Isa na lang.
Yes.
Okay. Ang coverage ng first quiz ay obligation and contract and sale ba? Kasama ba yung sale?
Yes po.
Kasama ang sale?
Opo, BP 20, meron pa po.
Pati yung specialist, wala kasi sa akin. Okay. Sige. Alright. Try natin itapos, i-cover for 3 hours yung contract, sales, and BP, yung specialist BP22. Okay? Questions? Wala na? Overtime na tayo? Yes po, Mr. Maliwan.
Sir, pwede po makahingi po ng copy ng PowerPoint niyo po.
PowerPoint? Ayoko nga. Joke lang. Siyempre, ipopost ko to sa stream. Sa ano natin, workspace.
Thank you po.
If you have any questions, concerns, pa-chat na lang natin kay Bidel. Tapos Bidel, please relay them to me so I can answer. Overtime na tayo, pasensya na. Happy weekend, everyone. I hope may natutunan kayo kahit paano. And let's call it a day. Thank you sa 44 na next day.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you po.